Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, major changes to the status quo in Jerusalem have been reported. Meanwhile, far from unity, Jewish groups at the Western Wall clashing over Tisha B'Av holiday practices. And finally, a trio of Israeli filmmakers spending their second Sabbath in detention in Nigeria. The groups are still being denied both official charges and legal representation. We begin tonight in Jerusalem. Israel accused of quietly breaking the status quo in the Holy City by letting Jews pray on the Temple Mount for the holy day of Tisha B'Av. The Temple Mount being the holiest place in Judaism, but also the site of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Temple Mount Plaza, where Jews are barred from praying. A tenuous status quo seemingly broken in Jerusalem. Police clashing with Muslim protesters as some 1,000 Jews visit the Temple Mount for Tisha B'Av. But beyond the visit, Israel also quietly allowing Jewish prayer on the Temple Mount for the first time since 1967, when Israel recaptured the eastern half of the city from the Jordanian occupation. Until now, any Jew seen praying on the Mount would be ejected if not subjected to arrest by Israeli police. This in an agreement with the Jordanian Islamic Waqf, which manages the Temple Mount among other holy sites. Israeli media, however, now revealing Jewish prayers at the site, a small group of individuals reportedly arriving periodically over the last month, but without any Jewish symbols, prayer books, tefillin, etc., so as not to draw unwanted attention. And while the Waqf is monitoring the group from afar, the cops apparently turning a blind eye entirely. And this is a major change, one that's causing massive uproar among the Muslim worshippers and protesters. They've been calling on Arab Israelis and Palestinians to block Jews from entering the area, and they've been likewise clashing with police, throwing stones from the Al-Aqsa Mosque at both pilgrims and officers alike, who've been working to disperse the crowds. Hamas terrorists in Gaza similarly warning, meanwhile, that Israel is playing with fire. Despite the rising tensions, however, Prime Minister Bennett on Sunday ordering police to continue allowing Jews to ascend to the Temple Mount, at least until after Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is arguably the saddest day in the Israeli religious calendar, marking the destruction of both the first and second ancient temples. It's also a day of fasting. And the Temple Mount, also known as Har HaBayit or HaBeit HaMikdash in Hebrew, is the holiest place in Judaism, as it's the site where both the first and second temples stood. Today, however, it's also the site of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, considered by many to be the third holiest site in Islam. In other news, just meters below the Temple Mount complex in Jerusalem, thousands of Jews gathered for Tisha B'Av prayers at the Western Wall Plaza. But apparently not all traditions are welcome. Ultra-Orthodox youths and activists actively disrupting services in the pluralistic section of the plaza, which is separated from the main section and put off to the side. The mostly teenage activists overrunning the conservative services, cursing at worshippers, and even setting up a gender partition, and all while ignoring calls for civility, particularly given the location and the occasion of such a holy day. In any case, joining me now to discuss is CEO and director of the Masorti movement, Rakefet Ginsburg, and Rabbi Dov Halbertal, former head of the Office of Israel's Chief Rabbi. Thank you both so much for being with us. Now, Rakefet, I'm going to start with you. What do you make of the disruptions at the egalitarian prayer space, and where were the police?
The egalitarian section is actually a section that was opened a few years ago already to prevent those fights in the main area of the Kotel. And as we know, Mitveh Kotel, the idea of having an agreement with about it came to the government and eventually suspended for an unknown time. Unfortunately, there is no rule there. They're just costume. Minhag HaMakom, like Minhag HaMakom in the section that is divided for men and women, for Ezrat Nashim and Ezrat Gvarim, the custom there is Orthodox. The Ezrat Israel, the section, the egalitarian section, the Minhag is to have egalitarian prayers. We hold them bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, mutual prayers, men and women together. That's part of the custom in this area. And that's exactly why it meant to be like that, to be there. Unfortunately, the police cannot force anyone to do that or the other, but coming there with a mechitzot, putting that, there just in front of the eyes of everyone, just like a finger in the eye for all of us, made in purpose to just make people, I don't know, Tisha B'Av, Sinat Achim, whatever you want to see that. I mean, the feeling was very, very hard and heartful to see hundreds of kids, young children, coming with their teachers, standing there, reading up loud, just to prevent from us to have our prayer like we do every year for many years already in this section. It was really hard night last night.
Rabbi Albert, how do you react to the scenes that have come out from the Kotel last night and this morning, and what Rakefet has just said?
My point of view is that the reforms as a movement, not as a private person, they should be removed from the Kotel, from everywhere in the Kotel. They are real traitors of the Judaism, of the Zionism. You saw in the last war, 200 rabbis supported the Arabs against the Jewish state. They are killing the Jewish soul. They are traitors that they have to be removed as a movement from everywhere. They love the Arabs. They have to be with the Arabs. Let them go to Gaza or to Jordan or to some place like this. They should be in the Western world. They don't believe in the Western world. They don't see it as an holy place. They are coming there only for provocation. The reforms.
Rabbi Habertal, I hate to cut you off.
Wow.
And I'm going to give you a moment to continue. But the organization last night.
How much hatred?
Well, I wanted to say that the organization last night was a conservative movement. It was not reform, Rabbi Albertal.
It makes no difference. The reform, the conservatives are almost the same in the eyes of the Orthodox, in the eyes of the tradition, the Jewish tradition. They kill both the soul of the Judaism. They don't prevent, they want to intermarriage with non-Jewish people. They are against the state. They are in favor of the Arabs. They like money and they like barbecuing in Miami Beach. They don't come to Israel. They don't want to fight here. They don't want to be in the army.
Anti-Semitism, what you're saying right now. That's anti-Semitism, pure anti-Semitism, what you're saying right now. I can't even hear that. That's how you treat Jews? That's how you treat Jews in Tisha B'Av?
In the deep meaning of the Judaism, you are not Jewish at all. You don't mind to marry non-Jewish people, no? You are against
so many guys. I don't even know where to start.
Let Kefet respond.
I don't even know where to start, but it doesn't really matter here. It doesn't really matter. We're not talking about what conservative Jews believe and what Reform Jews believe and what Orthodox Jews believe. If you want to talk about it, let's talk about it. But the idea of you thinking that you're the only Jew that have rights in this country, you're the only Jew that have rights in the Kotel, you're the only Jew that has a right to practice Judaism in his own way, this is horrible to hear, especially in Tisha B'Av, especially in the day like today, especially in a split in this nation like that. I mean, how can you say something like that? How you can humiliate? This is the second stream in the Jewish Jewry around the world, in Israel and outside of Israel. How can you say something like that? How can you say that we are not allowed to practice Judaism and we are less good or less Jews than you are? How can you say that I have less rights in this place than you are? All those words, all those lies that you just put all together, that's horrible to say. In Tisha B'Av, how dare you do that in Tisha B'Av? How dare you to lie like that in television on Tisha B'Av?
Rabbi Halbertal?
I'm shaken. I'm totally shaken.
It's amazing. She is responsible. She and the movement are responsible on destruction of the temples. They believe in nothing. They don't believe in the Western world. They don't believe in the temple. They are not Jewish. They are not religious. They don't mind to marry non-Jewish people. They hate the state. They are against. They love the Arabs.
Rabbi Halbertal,
those people, they have no right to be in the Western world. They have no right to be in the
my children are Jewish than you. My children, all three of them served in combat units for this country. How can you say things like that about my country, about myself, about my people, about my group? How can you say that? How dare you to talk like that to us? How dare you to say that I have less rights here, and I'm less Jew, and I'm less. Wow, I don't even have the words. How can you say that? How can you say things like that about? How dare you?
I'd like to interject very, very quickly, because Rabbi Albert, something that Rakefet actually touched upon is this is all about Tisha B'Av. And we know that Tisha B'Av, it's the anniversary of the destruction of both the first and the second Jewish temple. And in Jewish tradition, it teaches us that the temples were destroyed in large part due to divisions and hatred between factions of Jews. Many religious scholars and Prime Minister Bennett similarly have pointed this out. Bennett even doing so actually in a social media post. So, Rabbi Albert, how do you propose we bridge the divides? Because this sort of division is, I would say, very unhealthy for a society.
We cannot bridge it. The reforms as a movement. I emphasize.
But again, this is a conservative Masorti movement. This is not the reform anyway.
It makes no difference. They have to be.
Herbert offers you Milchemet Achim. That's what Rabbi Herbert offers you right now.
They have to be hated. They are responsible in killing the soul of the Judaism in generations for generations. They will disappear because they intermarriage. They hate the state. They love the Arabs. They have to disappear as a movement from Israel. It's not a matter of Tisha B'Av.
I'm in shock.
It's a matter of a Jewish state, of a will. They have to be, blamed as a traitors to the state, the Jewish state, and traitors to the Judaism. They have no place, not in the Kotel, in the Western way, that they don't believe in it at all. They have to stay in Miami Beach, in the States, or in Jordan, in Gaza, not to come here as a movement. We don't recognize them as a Jewish people.
All right, Kefet, final comments?
I was born in this country. My parents were born in this country. My grandparents almost born in this country. They arrived here very early. If Rabbi Herbert want to leave the country, he's welcome to do that. I'm here to stay. My children live here and build their houses here and serve in the army here. I'm Zionist more than anyone he knows, probably personally or from his group. I can't even hear those things. He's offering us Milchemet Achim. That's exactly what he's saying right now. Not to accept the one that is practicing Judaism a little bit different than you is horrible. It's hard even to hear that. This is exactly why the first and the second Bet Mikdash destructed, and he's actually taking us exactly to this direction again.
All right. Well, just for translation's sake, Milchemet Achim is a war between brothers or siblings. Rakefet Ginsburg, Rabbi Dov Halbertal, thank you so much for coming onto the program with us. All right, now on to a coronavirus update. Daily infections over the weekend reaching a nearly 4-month high. So Israeli authorities are again looking to cap the spread and to fix the government's, quote, insufficient actions. Hannah Rifkin with the report.
Over 1,000 daily infections on both Friday and Saturday, the highest recorded spread rate in Israel since the end of March, nearly 4 months ago. And the infection coefficient likewise rising to almost 1.5%, at least 63 people in serious condition, the death toll at 6,448. Then, Health Minister Nitzan Horowitz saying that government action thus far has been insufficient. The relative good news, though, is that thanks to Israel's vaccine campaign, most new infections are minor and do not require hospitalizations. Health expert Eran Segal putting things in perspective, saying that when we first crossed this threshold in November, the critically ill rate was roughly 26 per day, whereas today the number is around 8. Therefore, the coronavirus cabinet still trying to raise restrictions, but without resorting to lockdowns or other major disruptions to public life. Among the changes, a 2-part push to provide Israelis more autonomy. Part 1 being to flood the country with reliable self-testing kits, and Part 2 being the creation of official plans based on said kits. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett saying the test must become routine, like taking your temperature. Meantime, Prime Minister Bennett, Health Minister Horowitz, and Economy Minister Orner Barbivai meeting with event hall owners to formulate plans for indoor spaces. And they decided on the Revelry Pass, which, if approved, would put appropriate limits on large weddings, celebrations, standing performances, parties, and conferences. The framework, which doesn't cap the number of guests, does limit gatherings to people who are vaxxed, recovered from the virus, or who present a negative COVID test from within 48 hours of the event. Also, event halls found to be violating the rules would be subject to 5,000 shekel or $1,500 fines. The rules would not apply to sit-down culture events like theaters, movies, and concerts.
Moving on, the existence of a secret biometric database, including personal information and images of the majority of Israelis, has just been leaked. But far from apologizing or destroying the secret list, Israel's new Ministry of Interior is hoping to legalize it, and with far fewer safeguards than the official biometric database has. So what does this breach of trust and privacy actually mean for Israeli citizens? Here in the studio to discuss is legal counsel for the Israeli digital rights movement, attorney Jonathan Klein. Jonathan, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me again.
It's our pleasure. So how did this happen? And why did this database, why was it even created in the first place? What's the background here?
So back in 2009, when the discussions on the biometric database rose, the Ministry of Interior had a problem. They wanted an auxiliary photo database which would allow the clerks in the ministry, where you come to get service, to just type your name, ID number, and get your photo so they can recognize you when you get service, no problem. But because photos are subject to biometric search and manipulation, the legislation said that this database should be free from biometrics, meaning that all photos, images should be degraded in quality and resolution and be in a non-biometric quality. The thing is that from 2009 until today, technology evolved. It became better, and photos which were not subject to biometric search 12 years ago are today quite easily searched and indexed. So what happened is, instead of reducing the quality of that database, which is held by the government, they decided to promote it and use it. And this comes with a few other databases that the Israeli government is pushing nowadays. The first is the police database, the Hawkeye database, which is supposed to track license plates in real time and people in CCTV walking in the street. And other databases which we see on a day-to-day basis rising now, mostly because of COVID, but from other matters. What we see is an actual leak from the biometric database. We had an agreement with the government. We will provide them our fingerprints, our photos for a certain purpose. They will limit the use only for a small number of people, only for a limited purpose, but they broke that agreement. They went and breached our trust. They went and set up a new database which may be abused, as we see on a day-to-day basis.
Have we seen evidence of potential abuses?
In this database, not yet. But we've seen, just in the last week, if I can go through a few breaches, we had a police officer which was indicted this week for abusing police databases and sending material from investigations to his lover. We've had a few other breaches that we can show that people with access to government databases sold that material to private investigators. We see on a day-to-day basis that government workers are indicted for database access. It's one of the most popular crimes in the public service, and we know that there won't be a database which would not be breached later on. The Israeli Ministry of Interior was already subject to a big data breach back in 2006.
The elections and since then.
In 2006, when one of the employees took a CD with all the database to, use it as a dating service.
All right. Jonathan Klein, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you for inviting me again.
And if you'd like to see more of my interview with Jonathan Klein, please make sure to check out ILTV.tv or visit the ILTV YouTube channel or Facebook channel. Now moving abroad for a moment, Israel again offering aid to our allies in need around the world. This as Eastern Europe and Germany in particular is drowning. Days of heavy rain forming fast-moving rivers running through populated areas, sweeping up cars, surrounding homes, and worse. At least 160 people have been confirmed killed by the sudden lethal flooding, along with the displacement of thousands and the devastation of enormous swaths of property.
Wir waren zu Hause, haben auch erste Vorbereitungen getroffen, aber als der Bach dann überlief und es von oben aus den Hängen runterkam, war es eine Sache von 2 Minuten. Dann war der Hof hüfthoch überflutet und wir sind noch übers Fenster ausgestiegen, um dann nach oben hinweg zu flüchten.
Wir trauern mit denen, die ihre Freunde, Bekannten, Familienangehörige verloren haben. Ihr Schicksal zerreißt uns das Herz.
Israeli President Isaac Herzog then offering condolences to his counterpart in Germany and those of the EU. And moreover, Herzog writing that he agrees, quote, with the president of Germany that the challenge of global warming, which contributed to this calamity, requires us all to make a special effort, and Israel will be willing to help in any way possible, end quote. It's still unclear, however, what exactly is included in the aid Israel is offering. Heading now to Nigeria. As of today, it's been 9 days since Israeli activist Rudy Ruckman and his 2 colleagues, filmmaker Noam Liebman and journalist E. David Benaim, were detained by the Department of State Services in Nigeria. And the trio have neither been allowed legal representation nor officially charged with any reason for their arrest. What we do know now, thanks to leaks from local members of the Jewish community who've been in contact with the authorities, is that they're suspected of contacting and even supporting Biafran separatists. According to the filmmakers and their families and representation, however, nothing could be further from the truth. Ruckman, Liebman, and Benaim had arrived in Nigeria July 5 to film the first leg of their documentary, We Were Never Lost, which explores life in remote Jewish communities around the world. Ruckman even presented a Torah scroll and a shiviti as gifts to 2 different leaders in the Biafran Igbo Jewish community. But unfortunately, quote, members of non-state political groups have hijacked images of the filmmakers' gifts for their own purposes, end quote, according to the filmmakers' families. The families likewise pointing to a public statement from the trio which specified that the documentary is not intended to make political statements nor endorse any political movements. In any case, Israel is in contact with both the French and American embassies in efforts to free the 3 from detention. And the local chapter of Chabad has been organizing contact between Western officials and the detainees, while also providing kosher meals and generally working to improve the conditions of their custody. Now for our final story tonight, Israeli filmmaker Adav Lapid winning big at the Cannes Film Festival in France. Lapid earning the jury prize, another runner-up for Best Movie, for his semi-autobiographical film Ahezni, which takes a critical look at the supposed limits to artistic freedoms in Israel. More specifically, the Livewire film represents the director's professional, personal, and political conflicts with his own Israeli identity. The plot following a filmmaker who is struggling to come to terms with his mother's fast-approaching death, while also dealing with the hostility of government officials.
מה שתראו הכל היה באמת. כל המאורעות קרו, רק שימו לב לסגנון.
Meanwhile, Lapid's short film Star, also screening at Cannes, though it was not set to compete. Now let's take a look at the weather forecast with Hannah Rifkin.
So, starting off the week with night lows between 21 and 25 degrees Celsius and 30 degrees in Eilat. Then highs on Monday in the 30s throughout most areas of Israel, though hitting 40 in Katsrin and 43 in Eilat. Meteorologists predicting sunny skies all around. And now back to the studio with Aaron.
Now before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. Looks like an IDF soldier passing sweets or candies or something through the security fence. Oh, that's an Israeli staple right there. That is chocolate milk in a bag. Probably one of the greatest things that you could buy in this country. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.29 shekels to the American dollar and 2.61 shekels to the Canadian dollar. And finally, for the latest updates and news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as to our newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Aaron Porras. Be well. Thank you so much for watching.